Bible's got you tied in knots. If you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Well, yes, it is the Heretic Happy Hour, and I am Keith Giles. I'm one of your co-hosts here, and I'm excited about our series we are doing on sex. So that means, boys and girls, that you might want to leave the room right about now, because mommy and daddy are going to be listening to something a little inappropriate, probably, for your tiny ears. Bye-bye! But we also want to... I also introduce my co-hosts here. It's not just myself here. It's also Jamal and Matt are joining me. So guys, say hi.
Hi, friends. My name is Jamal. It's great to be back on the Heretic Happy Hour with you. I'm an author of Free to Love and soon to be Living for a Living, I think we just wrapped up the final edits on that and getting endorsements for that. And I'm really excited about that book coming out very soon.
Yeah, exciting, man. I think it's funny that we announced that this is going to be an adult episode, as if all of our episodes aren't. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, right.
especially with yours truly on the show, and I fucking cuss all the fucking time.
Right.
So, but anyway, really excited to be here on another episode.
Yeah, and I want to very quickly thank one of our sponsors, the Hope Center. This episode is sponsored by the Hope Center, a community resource center serving one of Alabama's poorest communities by providing a neighborhood market where neighbors can shop for food at no cost in an atmosphere of love and respect. Please visit their website at servealabama.org for more information and to make a generous donation.
Yes, and by the way, guys, I think if we were to break up our podcast into different seasons, I think season one of the emphasis of our podcast was just to let people know that we have a hotline.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I know. And one of the things I just pride myself in, as far as just like, I really feel good about just how I've been able to get the word out about that, because we do, like, people I think do know about this hotline.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just for, if you're a first time listener and haven't heard our announcement that we have a hotline, we do. And I'll give out the number. It's 240-343-7379. And for those who have a rotary phone, it spells out the word heretic, but we won't go into that. So 240-343-7379, call it 24 hours a day, text. We can get text. People like to text now these days. The young kids like to text.
Yeah.
So like you can do that. So I think, but before we get into the text, I think we actually have a voicemail. So can we have our engineer send that over?
Hi, my name is Stephen. I want you all to know how thankful I am for your podcasts. I listen to you all every day in my office as I'm getting work done, which I find it hard to get any work done when I'm listening to you because I get into your messages so much. You all are doing such an awesome job at exposing what I like to call white Jesus American Christianity, the conservative type of evangelicalism, exposing that, the hypocrisy, and then just flat out showing who Jesus is. It's so different. Jesus is so different from American Christianity. And I just really thank you all for what you're doing, for these podcasts. You are giving the teachings of Jesus, which is something that hasn't been done for so long. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. I'm learning a lot from you. My wife is learning a lot from you. And we're sharing it with others. So thank you. Please keep it up.
Wow. That was great. I honestly thought that would be a joke. I was waiting for someone to like turn the corner there, but no, he was dead serious, and that's really awesome. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. But Jesus wasn't white. This is news to me.
All the pictures I've seen of Jesus are white. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but
yeah. Well, that's really awesome. I really appreciate the caller. Thank you for calling in and sharing that. Just sharing your thoughts. By the way, I just want to say this, like the Southern I heard a Southern accent in the caller.
Yeah, I think so.
I personally, I don't know what it is about the Southern accent. I actually really like it. I've always really liked it. I feel like there's some kind of like, I don't know, sophistication or this like a just real, I don't know what it is, but I like the Southern accent. So it's really cool to hear that guy. And thanks for the love. And I'm we're really glad that you're getting a lot out of the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
True that.
Okay, I do think that we got a text in, a couple of texts. All right, let me go. Oh man, that's hot. That's hot off the press. Okay. Quote, "Hey guys, I'm really enjoying this sex series on the podcast because you are definitely addressing some issues that have been present in the church for a while. I listen to the podcast because I appreciate that you all tend to be open-minded and able to reflect on how the very privileges you have should be called into question when they negatively impact the church. My one suggestion is this. Next time you do a series on sex, it would be great to not just talk about how women are affected by the church's approach to sexuality, but invite one or more women to be part of the conversation beyond the Heretic of the Week interview. I so appreciated your thoughtful discussion during the Purity podcast, but I couldn't help reflecting on how it would have been so much more relevant to me, a woman, to hear another woman's perspective and not only men speaking on our behalf. Thank you so very much for all of the truth you speak in your podcast."
All right.
Well,
I would say thank you for your text. And just so you know, we did try to bring more women onto the podcast. And I hope it's okay to say this. We actually tried to get our significant others to join us, which I thought was a great idea. But apparently they're not as outgoing as we are, and didn't really want to come onto a podcast, especially for this topic, I think. But I mean, it's a good comment, and sure, we would be great if we could. We do our best to try to have as many different voices as we can when we do anything on the podcast. But sometimes that's just not possible. You know what I mean? That you kind of like, this is what we do. We're three guys who do a podcast together and talk about different topics. And in some ways, I just kind of feel like, I mean, I don't want to apologize for not being something I'm not. This is
We're three white males.
yes.
Yeah, Jamal.
The whitest name I've ever heard is Jamal. Definitely.
Jamal Jabanji. You're that white guy.
Like, you know how many people in Tupelo, Mississippi are named Jamal?
But we are men. Yeah, but she's got it. We are men, and then again, we're not against women. We're not opposed to that. Of course, we've had lots of female guests, and we want to have more. So
yeah, well, and I thought Taylor did great and talked a lot about the purity culture and had a lot of really good things to say. So
yeah,
I get the point of the text and I get the concern behind it. And I appreciate that this was approached tactfully and respectfully, and not just like, you guys suck for being anti-women. So thank you to the texter who approached us respectfully on that. And we hear you. But it was much more than just three dudes talking about the purity culture, because I thought Taylor was fucking dynamite. That was one of my favorite interviews, and she had a lot of great things to say.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Okay, one more text, Matt. Okay, it's hot. Can I hand this fax to you, Matt? Can you read this?
Do you want me to? I can't read this thing. This is offensive.
Wait. This is the fax?
How about you, Keith? Can you just be careful? It's hot out.
I'm not sure. I want to read this.
I want to hear Keith read it.
Okay, but you got to understand, please, audience. I am reading something that somebody texted. Okay, here we go. This is the text that we received. It says, "Is it necessary to ring that fucking piece of shit bitch ass bell every time someone fucking fucks a fuck? It's kind of distracting during the serious conversation bits. Fuck, shit, asshole."
Oh my God, Keith! Wow.
Just reading what they give me. I don't make the news. I just read it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the very enlightening text. But yeah, I that's what our producer does. So fuck that guy, but that's what he does. Anyway.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think he brings up a good point. Like when we started off the podcast, the cussing part was sort of, we kind of made light of it, and that's why I ring the bell. And we talked about about season 1. It was all going into a swear jar, and we were going to donate that to charity. But that's kind of done now. Like we're not really. Yeah. There is no swear jar. We're not really keeping track of anything anymore.
No. Yeah, and I did make my donation, so I think we can Yeah, we'll have to have a board meeting about this.
And I think we should have a meeting with our white male producer, Ralphio Mundo, and see if we can maybe we could retire the bell.
Yeah, fuck off. Anyway, we have some announcements. Before we get into the meat of this show, I just want to tell everyone that you guys can find us online at heretichappyhour.com. And that can be like your landing page for everything that the show produces. We got the store. You can get the episodes on there. And we also have a Facebook group where we continue the conversations that we're having on the show. And so please look, if you're on Facebook, go on to, just search Heretic Happy Hour and you can join the group. There's a couple questions.
Wait, Matt.
What?
Matt, is the Facebook group, is it connected to this podcast?
Yes.
Wait, I've heard a rumor that it is, but some people don't know that. Can you believe this?
Yeah, some people are in the Heretic Happy Hour podcast Facebook group and don't realize there's a podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're in the group, God dang it, listen to the podcast. All right. But yes, we have a Facebook group. And one last announcement: in 4 days from the time that this releases, Keith and myself are going to be flying down to Orange County for our first ever 5th live show.
Yes.
And that's going to be this Saturday, February 23rd from 6 to 9 p.m. at Sidecar Donuts Workspace in Costa Mesa, California. And we have an event page on Facebook. If you want all the details, if you're in the Facebook group, we'll be posting the details in there, so you can make sure to mark that on your calendar. And these live events are super fun. And also, we are going to try, if our producer can get his fucking act together. Oh, shut up. We are going to try to be doing a live stream of the show for the Facebook group. And so if you're not in the Southern California area, you can check that out in the Facebook group, and you can join us live via the beautiful thing called technology.
Yes, it is a beautiful thing. And hey, guys, if you cannot get enough of the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, and truly, who can? It's so addictive. Then you need to go to our Patreon page and make a donation and support what we do. And we will give you bonus content out the yin yang. You will not believe. We record bonus content. We record bonus interviews. We have so much awesome, cool stuff up there. You got to check it out. And we also want to we have some new people who decided to support us. So I want to thank our new patrons, Carl Angoli, Robert Reichert, Greg Ballou, Jeff Mason. Hey, Jeff. And Caleb Kirkfleet. I'm going to say Kirkfleet. Thank you.
No way. Is that the Caleb I'm thinking of?
Of course it is. How many Caleb Kirkfleets could there be?
My man, Caleb. I miss that guy. I love that's so awesome.
Anyway, thank you all for your support. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And guys, okay. So we're doing, we've been in the sex series for a while, and we are doing I guess the topic of this week is going to be on the LGBTQ issue. And so we felt like, and we're just talking, amongst ourselves, and we're just like, who, because we try to get heretics of the week, that come on our show that, can coincide to some degree with the topic of what we're talking about. So we've like, man, what would it be like to get a straight white male perspective on the LGBTQ issue? So
yeah.
So introducing the heretic of the week.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
Hi, I am Eric Reitan, and I'm a heretic.
Hi, Eric. Eric, we are so glad that you have decided to join us on the Heretic Happy Hour podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we tried this a couple weeks ago, and we had some technical difficulties. So now that we're here, we're super stoked for that. What we like to do is basically just start off with our guests by asking them the question, why is it that some people consider you a heretic?
It's my sinister consistency.
Ooh, I like that.
Wow.
Actually, that's an expression that Karl Barth used to describe Friedrich Schleiermacher, who's one of my heroes. Schleiermacher is this 19th century progressive theologian. And Barth took him on, and he called him his work of sinister consistency. And more specifically, throughout my career has really been about exploring the implications of the Christian love ethic and the idea that God is love in various domains. So I started out in grad school. My PhD dissertation was exploring the implications of the Christian love ethic for what I called the dilemma of defensive violence. You come across an unjust aggressor attacking a victim, and you're supposed to love both of them, right? And if you intervene with violence, you're not loving the aggressor as you should. If you don't, the argument is you're not loving the victim as you should. And my solution was to say that as Christians who want to live out the love ethic, we're called to become experts at nonviolent methods of intervention. And people called me naive for that, but no one called me a heretic. I then turned my attention to criminal punishment, and I argued that a approach to criminal punishment that was in line with the Christian love ethic would be reintegrative. It would aim to reintegrate the criminal back into the community.
Yeah.
I wasn't called a heretic for that. But I was giving a job talk at Calvin College on this theory of punishment. I was being interviewed for a job. And in the question and answer period, someone asked me, so what implications does this view of punishment have for divine punishment of sinners? And this was back in 1993. And I hadn't started exploring universalism yet, but my sinister consistency immediately jumped in. And I saw the implications almost at once in this big picture. I've been working on criminal punishment. What were the implications for divine punishment? And I didn't come out as a universalist then, but it didn't take me too long afterwards to come out as a universalist. And then people started to call me a heretic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And another thing they've called me a heretic for was when I started to explore the implications of the notion that God is love for the question of how would God reveal. And my argument is that a God of love would primarily reveal in persons, not in a text. And that we would learn the most about God through the messy business of trying to love one another, as opposed to through reading a book. And in other words, I was rejecting in this way the doctrine of biblical inerrancy, the doctrine that the Bible is the primary revelation of God. No, it's not.
Well, now you've done it.
Wow. Derek, I just want you to know I love you.
But yeah, for that I was called a heretic. And one of the ways in which I actually explored that issue was through a consideration of same-sex relationships and same-sex marriage. And in terms of my most recent book, The Triumph of Love, is about same-sex marriage and the Christian love ethic, and trying to work out the implications of a Christian love ethic with sinister consistency in relation to our LGBT neighbors. Primarily, my focus was on primarily in this book on gays and lesbians, not on bisexuals or transgender persons, because the issues that arise for same-sex marriage, which was my focus, for gays and lesbians is a bit different. And I wanted to sort of focus my energies and not, but in any event, I was thinking about same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships and what does the Christian love ethic tell us. The first thing that I think the Christian love ethic tells us is that we need to pay attention to our LGBT neighbors, and we need to pay compassionate, empathetic attention to them, and we need to be responsive to what we learn from such attention. And I think when we do that, we cannot lovingly sustain the traditional categorical condemnation of same-sex intimacy. I think the lessons of compassionate attention, if we prioritize those lessons and really take them to heart, don't allow us to continue to categorically condemn all same-sex relationships. The lessons of that compassionate attention, which love demands, on the contrary, call us to make the goods of marriage available to same-sex couples. So that's the argument in my most recent book. And when I started making that argument, I was called a heretic with more force and more vitriol than I had ever been called a heretic before about anything else. Among other things, I wrote this essay for, well, I originally wrote it for Religion Dispatches, but then it was reprinted in The Humanist. It was during this period when there was this spate of highly publicized suicides by young gay men. I don't remember how many years ago this was, but do you remember there was this period of time there was just one after the other? And
yeah.
And they were highly publicized. And then one of them hit very close to home. In Norman, Oklahoma, there was the city was going to declare LGBT month or something like that. And the city council was meeting to discuss this. And that city council meeting brought out the haters, right? And it also brought out this young man who was gay. And he thought, in a certain sense, that he had escaped the hate, the vitriol, when he graduated high school. And then he, in the city council meeting, saw just this barrage of hate among adults in his community. And he was so demoralized by this that he went home and killed himself. And I wrote about that incident and about Christian, what does Christian love call us to do? And my argument was, well, first of all, we need to pay compassionate attention. And if we prioritize the rigid interpretation of a static text, of a passage in a static text, over the lessons of love, we have chosen to forego living by the love ethic in favor of some other kind of ethic, right? And so, and so my argument is that there is an epistemology of love, if you will. That's a fancy philosophical term for love teaches us how to form beliefs, and the urgings that come from compassionate listening have priority over abstract theories like natural law theory, have priority over abstract theories like the doctrine of biblical inerrancy. When you begin to put those things above the lessons of compassionate attention, you have left the love ethic behind. And if a book like the Bible teaches you to love your neighbor as yourself, and a certain theory about the book, the doctrine of biblical inerrancy, encourages you to plug up your ears with Bible verses so that you don't hear the anguished cries of your LGBT neighbors, then I think you've got the wrong theory about that book.
Yeah,
Amen. Yes.
Eric, I wanted to ask you,
right.
And I kind of you're kind of headed this direction anyway, but I wanted to ask you some specifics. So, and I know this, all three of us know this by experience. Those who call you a heretic because you take the stance that you do on same-sex marriage, you and I, and we all here know the reasons why they do that. And as you've alluded to, it's because they can open their Bible and point their finger on a passage and read a verse that in their minds is telling them that they have a God-given mandate to condemn people who are gay. And so I'm curious, do you make any attempt to reason with people based on an exploration of those scriptures and what they do and don't say, or do you just sort of leave that there and take a different approach?
Primarily in in most of my work, because I'm a philosopher, I'm not a biblical theologian. I primarily take a different approach, but that doesn't mean that I can avoid looking at scripture and looking at the text. And I do in my most recent book, I do have a chapter that's devoted to scriptural issues, but it's just a chapter in a much larger line of argument. I mean, I have an overarching argument, which is, all right, this is the love ethic. I then try to work out what the love ethic teaches, and then I apply it, and I reach these conclusions about same-sex relationships and same-sex marriage. And then I say, but these are only tentative conclusions. This is standard philosopher approach, we need to consider objections before we can take these conclusions and run with them. And one objection is that there's this contrary argument derived from scripture. So how strong is that contrary argument? So that's one of my chapters in the book, is I look at the scriptural texts, but not being a biblical theologian, primarily I draw on others for the sort of close analysis of what these texts do and don't say. And primarily my strategy is to say, okay, look, there's debate about what these texts say. They're not as straightforward as people argue. And when there's debate about what these texts say, it's just to treat these texts as if they trump the lessons of love is problematic, even if you're a biblical inerrantist. And here I'm once again in my own domain. I'm approaching this as a philosopher. I ask, okay, it's only if you adopt a doctrine of biblical inerrancy, it's only if you adopt that theory about what kind of book the Bible is, that you are led from a tiny handful of texts to the conclusion that same-sex relationships must be a sin, right? It's a very tiny handful of texts, right? Minuscule. It's barely mentioned in the Bible, but it's a tiny handful of texts. And even if we set aside the disagreement about what those texts actually say, it's only if you adopt a certain theory about what kind of book the Bible is that those texts would have the power to trump the lessons of love. And that theory is just not the most plausible theory based on the content of the book itself, and based on, as I talked about earlier, how would a God of love reveal? Right. And at the end of that chapter, I actually tell a story from my daughter's earliest time here on Earth, which I think is a parable with a certain amount of power for critiquing biblical inerrancy. When my daughter was a baby, we couldn't get her to sleep through the night in her crib. She wanted to be next to mommy and daddy. And it got to a point, she was old enough that we decided, it's time for her to learn to sleep through the night in the crib on her own without being comforted to sleep. And we had read a book that we had used with my son. And the book gave instructions on how to do this, right? How to get your child to sleep through the night in their own crib. And the strategy, basically, which we had used successfully with my son, was you put the baby in the crib, or the child in the crib. While they're crying, you come and check on them every few minutes, comfort them with words, but don't pick them up. And you keep doing this until they fall asleep. And the idea is that they will now then learn to put themselves to sleep, and that's good for them, and it's good for the parents too. So we were going to try this. It worked well with my son, and we started with my daughter. And the first night, we got up every few minutes as she was standing at the edge of her crib screaming, and said comforting words and went back to bed. And we continued doing that all night long. She did not stop screaming. She never stopped screaming. It went all night long until the next morning when finally I took her out of her crib, put her in her exercise. This was 6 a.m. and she promptly fell asleep in the exercise. The next night, identical. The third night, exactly the same thing. And her behavior during the day was changing. She was not the loving, happy child that she had been, right? It was, and my wife and I looked at each other and we said, you know what? This is not that important, right? Yeah. We need to pay attention to our daughter and what our daughter is telling us through her behavior, through all of this, and not listen to this damn book, right? And what it's telling us. It might have been right for our son, but it's not right for our daughter. And so we threw out the book and we went back to comforting her, putting her to sleep and all of this. And, guess what? She's now 12 years old and she sleeps through the night in her own bed. She's fine, right? But if we had dealt with this by just putting in earplugs, I don't know what the result would have been, but I don't think it would have been good for her because she was not ready. Mm-hmm. If we had dealt with the problem by just saying, well, the book says, we would have been paying more attention to the book than to our daughter.
Wait a minute. Are you drawing some kind of an analogy between people who just listen to what the book says rather than the way people feel?
Right. And if we had been paying more attention to the book than to our daughter and what compassionate attention to our daughter was telling us, that would have been a shortcoming of parental love. Mm-hmm. Right. And yes, that is an analogy for what is happening so often with biblical inerrantists in relation to their LGBT neighbors. They are listening to the book and hardening their hearts against their gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender neighbors. They are listening to the book or above compassionate attention, or in worst case scenario, they are using Bible verses as earplugs so that they don't pay compassionate attention at all.
Wow.
Eric, that's beautiful. By the way, this is Jamal here, so it's great to have you on the podcast. I've been loving what you're sharing here. Is so good. I always chuckle when people, talk about the love ethic as if the Bible invented that, and I just find it. I actually heard a politician during the last presidential election. It was actually a really clever response, but someone said, "Do you use does the Bible govern your life?" And he goes, "Well, honestly, I didn't have to read it in the Bible to love my family. I didn't have to read it in the Bible to be a decent human being. Like if you have to read that in a book, then I would question how sincere it is, and that's, and I feel like all people, when they get to their basic essence of who they are, I don't think people really need to be taught what love is. They just need to recognize it. I think the easiest example is probably, anybody who's a parent, when you see that baby, it's not that love and acceptance, and it's really profound acceptance in a healthy situation. Obviously, a parent will accept that baby. It has nothing to do with belief or lifestyle or choices of that child at all. It's just you exist and I accept you. And I find that can, it's interesting that changes over time. Child will grow up and, take on political opinions that may be different from the parents, and the parent usually, again, in a healthy situation, can recognize, we just don't agree on that, but it does never call into question my acceptance and love and value for that person. And then, And then, I find it interesting that at some point though, when it comes to the sexuality question, so somebody who identifies as gay, lesbian, transgender, whatever you want to call it, then at that point, it's interesting that people will then say, well, I can't associate with you, or I don't agree with you. And now somehow the acceptance is based on belief, which I believe to be, it doesn't have to even be a sexuality issue. It could be anything, a political issue. It could be a difference of doctrine. We have, heaven for, we know in Christianity that people cut off relationships from far less, with you're a universalist, you're not, you believe this about the end times, this person believes something different. So there's all this argument, but I find it interesting. And this is what, I guess my question to you in this is, do you think it's possible? And so it's a question of judgment. So is it possible to hold a non-judgmental approach to somebody to say, I have no judgment over you and as a person, I accept you fully, I love you fully, yet still not be affirming of, so can somebody remain in a non-judgmental, totally accepting place, and just say, yeah, but I just don't see the same, I don't agree with your position on that, or I don't see things eye to eye, in the same way that, a Republican say, you know what, I just don't have the same political views as my Democratic spouse that is a Democrat, but I still accept you and love you, but I'm just not affirming. So can somebody be totally accepting, living by the love ethic, and yet not be affirming of the homosexual lifestyle? What do you think about that?
Okay. I actually talk about this in connection in my book. I have a chapter on loving the sinner but hating the sin, and this slogan has been horribly misused against LGBT persons as just an excuse to other them, to marginalize them, to abuse them. But I think that the principle itself is an inescapable, unavoidable part of trying to live out the love ethic, because you cannot, I think, live out the love ethic without standing in opposition to anything that that is contrary to love. That is contrary to love for our neighbors. So, when Martin Luther King Jr. talked about loving the racist while condemning racism, for example, he was describing what you have to try to do as someone living out the love ethic if you are going to take a stand against racism. You have to take a stand against racism if you're going to live out the love ethic. And you have to love the racist if you're going to live out the love ethic, right? And so you have to figure out, how do you do that? How do you do that? And so I think love the sinner, hate the sin is an essential principle. But I try to turn that principle a bit on its head, because it is always possible to love the sinner while hating what really is a sin, it doesn't follow that you can take anything whatever to be a sin without it interfering with your capacity to love a person. And so if condemning something by its nature gets in the way of loving your neighbor, that is evidence that the thing being condemned is not a sin after all. So because you can always love the sinner while hating what really is a sin, if hating something gets in the way of you loving the person, then, well, either you're not just hating the behavior, or there's something about the behavior that you're hating that makes hating it at odds with loving your neighbor. So, for example, I mean, just a simple example: can I really love my diabetic neighbor while hating the sin of using insulin? Right. I mean, if taking the use of insulin to be a sin interferes with my capacity to love my diabetic neighbor, and that is evidence of the fact that insulin use is not a sin. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And what I have found is that sincere, loving people who are convinced that all homosexual relationships are sinful who want to love their LGBT neighbors, sincerely want to, but feel committed to categorically condemn their most intimate, meaningful, life-enriching relationships, find themselves in a situation where they are compelled by what their preacher, what they think the Bible teaches them, to behave in ways that interfere with their capacity to authentically achieve what they want to achieve in relation to their LGBT neighbors, that is, love them. That is, they come with the most loving intentions, but they have this belief that is interfering with their capacity to live out those intentions and on the ground behave in ways that are genuinely loving.
Totally. I think if I were to clarify, I think it's one thing to obviously labeling something as sin could be. I mean, I would assert that it is a form of judgment. Saying something is sinful is a judgment call. But do you think it's possible to not have a judgment call, just not simply be affirming? In the same way to say it's not a sin to be, if you're a conservative politically, it's not a sin that somebody wouldn't say, oh, you hold liberal positions on healthcare, so that not necessarily a sin. It's just not affirming. Is it possible to not be affirming and without labeling something a sin in a judgment call way?
Okay. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I guess I want to say to that is if you are not affirming someone's political position, that is somewhat different than not affirming their most intimate, meaningful, loving relationship, right? It's a matter of, if you withhold affirmation from a political view, the place that a political view has in a person's self-understanding is not always, but often quite different than the place that a loving relationship has. And it's a matter often of identity, of who the person is. Now, with LGBT persons, they can adopt, it's possible under certain conditions to not affirm something that is part of a person's identity, and therefore, in a certain sense, not affirm who they are, but do so out of love, because the identity that you're not affirming is a destructive identity that is a self-understanding that is corroding them, right? And so you're not going to affirm that that self-understanding because it's corrosive. And so you can be genuinely loving in withholding such affirmation. But if something is an aspect of someone's identity, and it is not a corrosive feature of their identity, but an enriching feature of their identity, something that makes them their best self, something that makes their life better than it would have been before, and you're withholding affirmation from that, that's a bit more problematic. You are withholding affirmation from a part of who they are that is tied to their best self and their best life. So I have some worries there. It's what I'd say is it's a hard trick to withhold affirmation when it's something like that, and yet still come across as genuinely loving that person fully and richly and robustly. It's a hard trick to pull off.
Yeah,
maybe it can be done, but it's a hard trick.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I totally agree with all that. I'm so glad that that you're out there talking about these things, Eric. And you mentioned your book "Triumph of Love," and I'm really happy that Whippenstock put that out. And it's such a blessing to have. Can you tell our listeners what you're working on now and what you've got going on in the coming months or years, or that that you're excited about, that you're particularly amped to get out there?
Well, I've been thinking that I should more formally and in greater depth write up my my thoughts on the implications of the idea that God is love for divine revelation and what we should expect from divine revelation. That's something that I've touched on in I touch on it in The Triumph of Love. A few pages on the scripture chapter. I touch on it actually in my first book, Response to the New Atheist, Is God a Delusion? I don't remember exactly the context. A few years ago I wrote the book. But I touch on it there. And I actually gave, when I was a few years back, the president of the Central States Philosophical Association, I gave my keynote presidential address about that topic. But I haven't sat down and really written that extensively. So I'm thinking that something on basically the philosophy of revelation and its implication for how one views scripture would be a next major project of mine. But I'm also following through these days on the whole issue of marriage, because there's this argument that you see both on the left and on the right, that the case for same-sex marriage is also a case for what's commonly called inclusively plural marriage, right? Polygamy, polyamory, and this sort of thing. And I'm not convinced by that. And so one of the things I'm exploring right now in my research is, after same-sex marriage, what else? Does a love ethic call us to endorse polygamy? My own thinking is no. Part of the reason is actually comes from my fiction writing. John Gardner in The Art of Fiction thinks that the ideal number of characters to have in a story in terms of main characters is 3. Because if you have 2, there's only 1 relationship to explore. But if you add a third, you've got 6 relationships to explore. Because you got A's relationship to B, B's relationship to C, C's relationship to A, A's relationship to the B-C pair, B's relationship to the A-C pair, etc. Right? So you add a third person and it becomes, in fiction, a much richer, more complicated terrain to explore. But I think the same is true in relationships. And if you have a partnership of 2, you've got 1 relationship to manage. You add a third, you've got 6 relationships to manage. And that can be overwhelming, and it's, I think, by its nature, less stable, unless you impose hierarchy on it, right? Parents can do it with children because it's hierarchical. But you don't want to impose hierarchy on an intimate love relationship. And so for reasons like this, I'm trying to make a case for monogamy, if you will. And that may culminate in an article. It may culminate in a book. I don't know.
Wow, sounds amazing.
All that sounds super interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Eric, we loved having you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Yeah,
it was my pleasure.
Was awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, Eric.
Absolutely.
And some really good stuff there. My favorite part was when he was talking about how a God of love, if there was a God of love, how would a God of love communicate to his creation? And I think that was a beautiful thought. And I think it makes so much sense. We have a God who's love and he's relational. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Which, it's going to take us right into our podcast episode topic. And
yeah, it's such an important topic. And I think the 3 of us individually have spoken in affirming the gay community, and we've even alluded to it several times on the podcast over this year and a half we've been doing this now, and so it is important, and I think it's important mainly because of the real lives that are damaged and affected by some very destructive teachings that the church has had for pretty much, I guess, a very, very long time, hundreds of years, couple thousand years now. We've treated people who were gay, who were homosexual, lesbian, bi, trans, in horrific ways. And so on the one side, it's important for us to speak up and affirm and to correct some of that and apologize for some of that, and also to clarify. I think a lot of the teaching that's created this behavior within the church is coming from a place usually of grossly misunderstanding some of the texts, or sometimes very much on purpose obscuring the true meaning of some of those texts, to really kind of use the scriptures as a club. And there's a reason why some of these verses are called clobber texts, because they are really used to assault people emotionally and physically and spiritually, and it's just a really horrible thing.
Well, and I'm glad you start by mentioning what you mentioned. It's like, before we get into what the Bible says or what our pastors say or what church history says, we need to rightly acknowledge that real lives have been affected in real traumatic, horrible ways. And I think that's when we can step back from what the Bible says and we can actually listen to people in the LGBTQ community, people who maybe have kids who are gay or lesbian or bi or what have you, and listen to their stories first. Who cares what the Bible says at first? And I know I'm going to, people are going to. I was waiting for that, because when it comes down to it, what really matters is people, and what matters is their experience and how we treat them. And if we're going to be anything as Christians, we need to be loving and caring. And I know people will say the loving thing to do is to warn them about the hellfire that's coming, or we need to, denounce and not affirm their sexuality. And they would suggest that's the loving thing to do. But if you really step back and ask people in this community, that's not the loving thing to do, because that's not what they're saying is loving.
Right.
And so if we're going to be loving, we need to listen to the people who we claim to love and ask them with empathy, are we being loving when we do this? Well, the answer is no. And so that's what we first need to do before we get, and we'll get into the biblical stuff, I'm sure. And Keith and myself, I don't know if I haven't seen any stuff from you written down, Jamal, but I know Keith and I have written many blogs on the biblical passages and the Greek context and, all that stuff. But I'm just glad that, Keith, you first started by saying it's important to listen to people and to look at the damage the church has done to any marginalized group, and the LGBTQ community has historically been one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of these things where, and this is kind of a recent thing for me, I think probably only in the last maybe 2 or 3 years that I actually started affirming and writing and blogging about this issue. So it took a long time for me to turn the corner on it, and it wasn't easy for me. But what's really amazing is that once I started really digging into it, I'll be honest, I dug into it originally scripturally. I did feel hung up on some of these scripture passages that, hey, when I open my English Bible, my English translation of the Bible, and I look right there it says, there's the sentence that says homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom, right? And so what do I do with that? Well, so again, that was my first sort of hang up. And sort of what ran in parallel for me was, as I was looking into the scriptures, and I found out, the word homosexual didn't appear in the Bible in any English translation until 1946. Like, what? So that word shouldn't even be there. And then what are the Greek words that are being translated as homosexuality? And you find out that prosenokotai and malakoi, whatever they mean, do not map at all to what anyone would consider homosexuality today. And again, we can get into that a little bit, maybe a little bit later into the podcast here, but just recognizing that, that word isn't even in the New Testament scriptures. It shouldn't be there. And that's not even what's being addressed in those passages. But again, in parallel to that, and this I think was God's grace to me, honestly what happened was I sent my first article where I was going to be affirming. I sent it to several friends of mine and asked that I respect. And I said, could you guys read this? And I really just wanted them to check me on my, I didn't expect them to agree with my conclusions, but I just said, check me on my scholarship here. Like, am I really treating the scripture fairly? Am I saying this the right way? Just really more of that from that perspective. And I really didn't expect most of them to agree with me and affirm what I was saying. But the shocking thing was that all of those people came back and affirmed what I was saying. And several of those people that I sent it to actually said, can we have lunch together or can we have coffee together? And when I said, okay, and we sat down and had coffee together, they came out to me. And I had no idea.
Oh.
Yeah. And so,
wow.
It's like one of these things where then it was the sudden realization, and this happened several times. So like several people, some of them were trans, some of them were bisexual, some of them had, struggled with same-sex attraction their whole life. And these are people I would never, ever have guessed. And so then that was the realization that, oh my gosh, I already love a bunch of people who are Christian and gay. I just didn't know that they were gay. But I did not doubt that they loved Jesus. I did not doubt their faith and their devotion to the Lord. And I certainly didn't doubt them when they told me that this was something they had struggled with their whole life. So it's sort of like as I was studying it academically, at the same time I was being given real world evidence in my actual life that yes, you can be gay and Christian. And these were not oxymorons. These were not mutually exclusive concepts. So that was really great. That honestly is what helped me so much, I think, to be more bold in what I was asserting in my articles.
Yeah, I think all those are great points, and it just it's like a testifying to the fact that when people can trust those who are allies and those, it's like you can get some real great truth, and truth can be realized, and they're coming out. And I know you say struggling with same-sex attraction. It's only struggling because of how the church views them. But once you realize that once they realize you're an ally and you're safe to come out to, it's like it's no longer a struggle. We can be open and truthful about that. And I just think that's beautiful.
This is obviously very layered, nuanced topic. So I think there's obviously been such hurt. And we all know this because we all come from the Christian world. The Christian world does not deal with minority anything very well. So, and that's not just because it's the Christian world. I just think it's part of the human dilemma, the human problem that we've had. I think just religion, probably takes a magnifying glass and makes it much larger and more painful in that sense. But I think in the human dilemma, the humanity over the course of history has not done well with accepting or, tolerating people. It's just that the people are scapegoated all the time. People are looked to be excluded if they don't fit the norm, if they're not part of the majority. It's like, and so that has been an issue for a long time. And within the Christian world, obviously anything that deviates from whatever subset, there's a lot of different subsets. So if you're in a charismatic church, if you don't have the outward symbols of, what they would consider spiritual gifts, speaking in tongues, healing, all that stuff, then you're the oddball out, and then you don't fit. If you're in, intellectual circles and you don't think that way, then you don't fit. So any group setting, and this is true. I mean, you experience it. We experience it in school. Any setting that you don't fit the normative popular club, then you're the oddball out. And so I do believe there's been a lot of damage, obviously, to the gay community, and the LGBTQ community has felt that from the Christian world in very, very strong ways, but also from society in general, because I do think this is the human dilemma. So what I'm really glad to see happening in this current age is this current day we're living in is I really do believe the pendulum is correcting the imbalance in that. So there's just even what we're dealing with in the immigration issue, we're really becoming conscious of how marginalized groups are affected. I think it's very positive for the evolution of humans. I think it's a really good thing. It's loving to be aware of how marginalized groups have been affected. So I think that's positive. I think that really is positive. Anytime we bring in sexuality, however, to the conversation, there's many layers to it. And it's nuanced. So this is a conversation that can be sticky because, anything, I think it's not just in my opinion, there's not just a black or white conversation. So I don't come at this. Christians, and another thing you're seeing within Christianity is Christians are at a place where, very primitive way of thinking is, what does the Bible say about the subject? Because, and I know that's going to offend some people, but like, the Bible doesn't say anything about anything. The reason I say that is
the Bible's not real.
Because the Bible doesn't exist, right, Jamal?
The Bible is actually not real. I mean that. Really, it's actually not real. It's literally some group of people in the 4th century, a selective group of people in the 4th century that claim to be speaking for everyone, invented a list of writings written by many, many different authors over a period of, a few thousand years, put it together as if it's one book. And then, it starts with Genesis and ends with Revelation. I mean, that is an arbitrary list. That was not, these writings were not written in such a way that they were meant to fit together. There's a lot of just magic and wishful thinking and all that. And then we present the book as if it says the same thing about something, and it just doesn't. So, and you're dealing with ancient mindsets. First of all, I love the writings in the Bible. I think you can get a lot out of them. I think you can see inspiration in much of it. I think there's just great cultural insight and all this kind of thing, but it doesn't really, I don't look at it like, okay, I need to look at this book to tell me what is right and what is wrong, what God approves of and what God doesn't approve of. So if you're looking at trying to understand sexuality from a book that it doesn't really exist in the form that we've been presented, it just doesn't. There was no such thing as the Bible until some group invented it in the 4th century. So you're really going to have problems trying to understand something and get your mind around something if you're looking at a book that really doesn't exist in the form that, it's like these letters were not written in such a way that they meant to flow with one another. It's really difficult to make sense out of anything when you approach it that way. So I think you're seeing that reaction as well. So I don't look at the LGBTQ issue as, is it right or wrong? Which I think so many Christians are wrestling with that. They're saying, okay, it's right. And again, and that's cool if you want to say, oh yeah, it's right, or it's wrong. And if that's how you want to look at it, fine. That's going to be, you're going to have to deal with that. But like, I don't think it's a conversation of right and wrong. I think there's a lot of layers to it, and there's some understanding we can come to about what does it say about humans, what does it say about sexuality, and then we can go in that direction. If we'll take it out of that grid of right and wrong, what does the Bible say? What does God say? Because I think that's just, we're not going to get anywhere in that conversation with that.
Well, and it's kind of, to me, it's ironic. Because when you do go to the Bible, if that is your lens and you want to base your life and your worldview off so-called biblical authority, when you go to the Bible, there's really only like 6 or 7 of these so-called clobber passages, and I think maybe now would be a good time to at least address those for the folks who do want to know about those. And I know, Keith, you've written a bunch of articles on that. I've done the same, and I included a book or a chapter in my latest book on this issue. And from my research, and I've talked with Hebrew scholars and New Testament scholars, there's really no case to be made even on the specific so-called clobber verses. So for instance, like in Leviticus 20, it's a man shall not, or a male shall not lie down with a male as he does with a woman. In the Hebrew, you have this sort of like wonky use of language where it's like, I think it's a zakar and a ish shall not lay down together. So it's not just this instance of like this universal law of a man and a man not lying down together. It's very specific. And when I've spoken with Hebrew scholars, they've said basically it's like, an uncle shall not lie down with a nephew, a grandfather with a grandson. So it's again, if we're just going to be, we speak English, and many of us, that's all we speak. If we're just going to open our English Bibles and say, see, it's like, well, no, in Hebrew, that's not what it's being conveyed there. So that's just one example. And I know, Keith, you've got some examples from the New Testament because I've read a lot of your articles on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think that the two main things, that there's 2 main words in the New Testament that Paul uses, malakoi and ursunakotai. And so malakoi, what I find fascinating is malakoi is a Greek word that typically is translated and used to be is effeminate. And I think even in the King James Version, which is before 1946, no English translation included the word homosexual. So if you go back to English translations prior to that, and you look at those passages like 1 Corinthians, what is it? 1 Corinthians.
Well, there's Romans and 1 Timothy as well. Can I just say one quick thing about Romans? The ironic thing about Romans is that the quoted so-called homosexual passage, I think it's verses 26 and 27 of chapter 1, aren't even Paul, but that's an aside.
Right. Well, let's get to Romans in a second. But on the malakoi, it's 1 Corinthians, I think, chapter 6. So when Paul talks about malakoi, again, that word is effeminate. And if we look at even people like Plato, Aristotle, they use that word malakoi. So like Plato in his Republic wrote that he said, quote, "Too much music makes a man malakoi, or soft, feeble, unfit for battle." Aristotle also warned about the dangers of men becoming too soft, or malakoi, by involving themselves in pleasures of like art and music and things like that. In Paul's day, especially in the Jewish culture, if you were a man and you shaved off your beard and had a smooth-skinned face, you would be malakoi because you were effeminate. You looked like a woman. You had a clean-shaven face. So understand this is a cultural thing that was going on, and it was
Keith, hey Keith, I don't mean to interrupt you, but are you talking about worship pastors?
Yeah. So basically, on this podcast, I'm the only one that's not malakoi. Matt and Jamal are malakoi. So, but again, so understand here, this is a cultural thing, like in their minds. And also, I got to stress this as well. In every case, not just in the New Testament, but in these other cases of Josephus and Aristotle and Plato and other ancient references to malakoi, it was always a reference to a straight man who had effeminate qualities. So, in other words, it's like saying the way we would today, you'd say to a straight man to sort of insult him, "You throw like a girl," or "You run like a girl," and that only works if you're talking to a straight man, right? To sort of insult him or belittle him or put down or something. But again, this is not describing someone who is same-sex attracted. This is not someone who's homosexual. So again, I don't think anyone. I hope no one with a clear mind would be comfortable reading 1 Corinthians 6. And reading, "Well, the Bible says, 'Know you not that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor a man who has a clean-shaven face will enter the kingdom of God.'" What? Like, would we honestly believe that? So if I'm a straight man, but I shave my beard and I like music and art and poetry, I don't get to go into the kingdom of God because that is what Paul is suggesting in that verse. So we would say, hopefully we would be intelligent enough to say, well, maybe this is a cultural thing, that in Paul's mind, this was something that was frowned upon, and that we would today treat Paul's words here the same way we would treat Paul's command multiple times when he says, I would that all men everywhere, as everyone everywhere, would greet one another with a holy kiss. He says this multiple times. Well, we don't do that today. Why don't we do that? It's in the Bible. Paul commanded it. More than once he said we should do it. Why don't we do it? Because we recognize this is a cultural thing. And in Paul's day, this was acceptable and this was what they did. But we don't do that in our culture. So we ignore that passage. And I would encourage us to do the same when it comes to this word malakoi and this idea that if a man is effeminate, he can't enter the kingdom of God. We now recognize that's just ridiculous. I would hope so. And that even if you didn't agree with that, you would at least agree with this. That malakoi is not referring to someone who's homosexual.
No, it's not. And even like talking about 1 Corinthians, I think even Johnny Mack admits that the context surrounding that, and he says it's Corinthianizing, it's all about shrine prostitution. And so when you read the passage, you just look at all those all the other things that keep you out of the kingdom of God. I mean, they're so coercive. So to all of a sudden, like, be talking about a monogamous, or polyamorous, since we just had Chuck on. I'm just fucking with you. But a loving relationship that's so out of context. Even if we really didn't know what the word meant, but if we were going to say, oh, it's this, and it's like, well, but all these other things are about like deception and coercion, and all of a sudden now you're going to talk about like a loving partnership or something like that. That doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think anyone honestly, I mean, you know, if you're not affirming, you're not affirming, but anyone reading these things honestly cannot say that the Bible's clear, you know, because it's like, no, it's so not here. It's not.
Yeah. And then 1 Corinthians 11 is another example where, because you hear this all the time, the argument is, well, look, homosexuality is not natural. It's unnatural. Yeah. Do you know what else Paul says is unnatural in 1 Corinthians 11? He says, doesn't nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a shame to him, but if a woman has short hair, right, this is unnatural. This is, again, a category of what Paul would have said is, quote unquote, unnatural. So again, now we're condemning men who have long hair or women who have short hair, that they're unnatural. And now again, they're under some condemnation and they can't enter the kingdom. Of course not. We accept.
Well, I would also suggest it's kind of weird to talk about what's natural and unnatural, like on your smartphone, and telling people what's natural by typing in your smartphone and putting something on Facebook. Like, who gives a fuck what's natural and unnatural? Like, I mean, are you serious? Do you drive a car? I don't find cars naturally occurring in the world. I mean, goodness, that's just silly. But
as long as we're on this topic here, can I read something from one of my favorite New Testament scholars, David Bentley Hart?
Oh, absolutely. Love hearing from him.
Love David Bentley Hart. And we did interview him. I can't wait. That'll eventually come out very soon. But he has some notes in his New Testament translation under 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And he addresses the Arsenokotai, specifically the word Arsenokotai and Malakoi. So he says, I'm quoting him. He says, a man who is Malakos or Malakoi is either soft in any number of senses, self-indulgent, dainty, cowardly, physically weak, or gentle in various largely benign senses, delicate, mild, etc. Some translators of the New Testament take it here to mean the passive partner in a male homoerotic act, but that is an unwarranted supposition. Precisely what a Arsenokotai is has long been a matter of speculation and argument. Literally, it means a man who beds, that is, couples with males, but there is no evidence of its use before Paul's text. It would not mean homosexual in the modern sense of a person of a specific erotic disposition, for the simple reason that the ancient world possessed no comparable concept of a specifically homoerotic sexual identity. It would refer to a particular sexual behavior, but we cannot say exactly which one. And then he says, my guess at the proper connotation of the word is based simply upon the reality that in the first century, the most common and readily available form of a male homoerotic sexual activity was a master or patron's exploitation of a young male slave. So, and then I think he says, I thought there was another reference. I think he also references the fact that, darn it, I thought it was right here in front of me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He says, he goes on to mention that the Clementine Vulgate interpretation of the scripture, the word Arsenokotai, it translates them as male concubines or prostitutes, and that Luther's German Bible interpreted that word as referring to pedophilia. And then he has one final note. He says, my guess at the proper connotation of the word is based simply upon the reality that in the first century, the most common and readily available form of male homoerotic sexual activity, again, was pedophilia. So anyway, I think, to me, I really respect him and his scholarship. I think if you really do get beyond sort of the rhetoric that comes through the pulpit or the Christian airwaves, you really go and look at what scriptures say. What you see is that what the scriptures actually teach is not a condemnation of homosexuality. I had someone yesterday on Facebook. This is kind of funny. So, you know, Facebook gives you your birth, like all your friends list. It's their birthday today. So I every day I kind of go through and I'll say happy birthday to these random people. I don't even really know most of them on Facebook. So one of these guys came back to me, sent me a message, and he said, thank you for the birthday wish, but you are not my brother in Christ because I've seen that you affirm homosexuality and you are not true to the word of God. I'm like, oh, well, I said, actually, no, I am true to the word of God because the actual scriptures don't say anything at all condemning homosexuality. I said, I guess I'm not as liberal as you. I don't accept modern translations that add words in there that aren't actually there. Because that's the odd thing about it is like, if you affirm LGBTQ people, you are called liberal, right? You're called, you're someone you're accepting these quote unquote new teachings and you're twisting the scriptures. When the irony is, no, if you are looking at that English translation and it's something, that word homosexual is in your Bible, you're the one has a Bible that is twisting the meaning of that word in a new way that it never did before.
Oh, snap, son. I hear the train coming.
I really feel strongly the need to say this, that if you are gay, if you are trans, if you identify basically as anything other than straight, you're not broken. That, like, I don't want to give this idea that, well, if you're that way, you're not normative, you're not natural. You have some trauma, some emotional thing you got to work out. You're confused, whatever. But eventually you could get fixed, or you could get unbroken or whatever. And I just want to affirm I don't think that's true. And I think to even put that suggestion over somebody who's already marginalized, who already feels, alienated from their family, from their church, from the body of Christ, from society, or anything like that, I wouldn't want anyone in that situation to feel that way, that you're not broken, you're not screwed up. Now, again, on one level, sure, we're all broken, we're all screwed up, right? We all have issues and things to work out. I do too. But it's not something that I would say is only this is only applies to people that are broken, people that are screwed up. Those are people that are not straight, but straight people we're okay. No, we all have our stuff to work out, but I would want to affirm, if you're gay, if you're trans, if you're homosexual, you're queer or bi or anything like that, you are loved, you are human, you are whole, you are complete. You're not someone who needs to be fixed. You're not broken in that sense. And I would want to affirm you as a human being, and affirm you to stand up straight, feel like you belong in the human race, certainly feel like you belong in the body of Christ. And the fact that you're not straight isn't something that should prevent you from being a loved, accepted, and affirmed member of the body of Christ, or of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Do you have any, since we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, do you have any resources for people? I'll just throw one out there, a book by John Shore called Unfair, I thought was really good on this issue. I know Matthew Vines, he's more of a conservative writer, right? But he's kind of got the book, I don't remember the title. Is it Gay Christian or Christian and Gay? Okay, but Matthew Vines, I guess, if you're coming from a conservative background, I think he would resonate with you. Keith, you and I have written a lot of blogs. You can blog entries on this, so I know you can go to your blog and my blog if you're curious about this question, or the more theological approach, I suppose.
Yeah, one book I really like, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me. I think the author's name is Brownson or Brownlee, and it's Jesus, the Bible, and Homosexuality, or maybe it's Jesus, the Bible, and Sexuality. But if that honestly, for me, I read tons of scholarly books that were both pro and against homosexuality. And that's the one book that I read that I felt like to me, it made the most sense. It was the most thorough. And I really love that book. And again, I can't remember. I think it's Jesus, the Bible, and Sexuality. And I think the author's name is either Brownson or Brownlee. And I don't have it around me here.
Is it Bible, Gender, and Sexuality? James Brown?
You know what? Yes, that's exactly what it is.
So it's Bible, Gender, Sexuality, Reframing the Church's Debate on Same-Sex Relationships by James V. Brownson.
Wow, you just pulled that out of thin air. That was great.
Google is my friend.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So, this has been a good episode. I'm glad we're having this. I'm glad that three white straight males can have this conversation.
Because we're qualified. That was what qualifies us.
Yeah, and just saw all the
Yes, that naturally makes us qualified.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, it's been nice knowing you guys.